Wagwan. If I asked you, what do you think of Lance Vance, most of you'd probably say that he's a dumb, irritating and overly optimistic moron who only scuffs everything up and pisses others off. And no wonder, that's exactly how Lance is being portrayed by Vic Vance, or even to some extent by Tommy, both of whom mostly complained at him. However, is this really what Lance is like? Was Vic and Tommy rightly complaining at what he was doing? Is the opinion that most of the GTA community has of him right? That's exactly what we'll try to determine in today's video. We'll go through his entire GTA storyline in Vice City Stories and then Vice City, and we'll take a much closer look at his actions and look beyond just the protagonist's reaction. First of all though, we need to gather all info that we got about Lance from before the events of the game, as it will be very crucial in further analysis. Lance was born to a Dominican father and an American mother, presumably somewhere around the late 50s. The location of his hometown is unknown, although we can be certain it was a significant distance away from Vice City, as Lance arrives in Vice City via a plane in GTA Vice City Stories, which wouldn't make sense logistically if Lance was living close. Although, who knows, the family may have moved at some point prior to 1984, but yeah, we simply don't know too much about that. Anyway, Lance's father presumably lost contact with the family while the kids were still young or not even born at all. We know that Lance's father moved to America from the DR and met Lance's mother there. However, Lance claims that he and his brothers were raised by her aunt Enid, not their mum, who was always on drugs, nor by their father, which suggests that he lost contact with the family.
I'm tired of your bullshit, Mom. You come here to ruin things for us again.
How can you say that? I raised you!
Aunt Enid raised us, not you.
Especially that Lance directly at one point mentioned that him and Vic had no contact with their father.
I found a way in. 2 kids, broken home, no education, no father.
Lance had 2 brothers, older brother Victor and another was Pete, who was suffering from asthma. From what the characters say about Lance, he was not really a good kid. He was silly, troublesome, inept and struggled to build positive relationships with his peers nor family members. We know that Lance has once been kicked out of the Boy Scouts.
So what am I? A handicap, huh? Your dumbass, low-life, no good brother?
Something like that.
Yeah, well, I'm not the one who got kicked out of the army.
No, you're the asshole who got kicked out of the Boy Scouts.
As well as he was bullied at school, as other kids laughed at the close similarity of his name to his surname.
One thing puzzling me, what's with Quentin? I don't know, I always kinda liked it. Quentin Vance. Vance? Your name's Lance Vance? Hey, I got enough of that at school.
Lance would also regularly stir up trouble not only for himself but also Victor, therefore earning himself a rather poor reputation in his older brother's eyes.
Oh, come on, man. I come all this way to see you and you treat me like I got herpes.
Maybe that's because your whole life you've gotten us into trouble.
Lance's oddness was so significant in his youth that Victor even had suspicions that Lance may actually suffer from a mental illness.
Brothers, one is real sick, asthma, and I gotta pay the bills. The other, well, maybe he's sick too, but in a different way.
Now we can get to the actual games, starting of course with the year 1984 and Vice City Stories. The family situation was tough. Aunt Enid still took care of the household and Pete, who as we remember, struggled with asthma. Lance's mum, Janet, was still very much into drugs, which additionally encumbered the family's already modest budget.
I've been kicked out of the military. Now I'm working with jerks, robbing people, all to pay for my brother's medical bills. While my mother freebases half the money I send anyhow.
Pete was presumably unable to work, so was his mother. The same presumably applied for Aunt Enid, who was already very busy with the household chores and taking care of Pete. We don't know whether Lance was employed, however, it's very possible. Lance was also supposed to be of course assisting his aunt with the work at the house, but often failed to perform his duties and was outside a lot. The main financial column of the Vance family in 1984 was Victor, who moved to Vice City. Vic joined up the local army unit and that was what the family was mainly living off of. Lance was not satisfied, as one could expect, with the situation that he and his family was in. At some point, Victor, after getting involved in working for a corrupt sergeant, got sacked and left with no opportunity of legal income, being forced to become an errand boy for gangsters. Victor, however, quickly thrived in that environment too, soon taking over the operation of one of the smaller local thugs and began to earn money again. It was then when Lance decided to move out of the house and relocate to Vice City, where he hoped to reunite with his older sibling and help him in his new line of business. We can be pretty much certain that Lance had no education, nor qualifications, nor any interest in getting any. Therefore, it's no wonder that illegal way of earning money was the one most appealing to him. And that way we arrive at the mission Jive Drive, where Victor collects Lance at the airport. We can see now the poor reputation that Lance earned himself in his childhood, especially in Victor's eyes. Vic was not pleased to see Lance, as he knew that he was very troublesome. However, Lance promised to Vic that he had changed, rethought his past behavior and reformed. Victor, though reluctantly, allowed Lance to join his operation, hoping that Lance may have indeed improved his personality. The first test of that came instantly as the local gang of cholos arrived at the airport trying to kill Victor, who in the preceding weeks had had multiple clashes with them. The brothers tried to escape with Lance taking the wheel and Vic shooting the gangsters chasing after them. Eventually, the brothers' car crashed after Lance drove onto a totally naturally placed wooden ramp in the middle of the road. Vic was not impressed with that move and was already complaining at Lance's driving abilities. The brothers, however, managed to get rid of all the cholos hunting for him and flee. At the end of the mission, Vic found out that Lance rented himself an expensive hotel for his money.
Impressive! This place ain't cheap. I wouldn't know. I told them to bill you.
And now this will be the first thing I'm gonna give my opinion on, and I don't like it. Such behaviors hint at negative personality traits such as little need of self-dependence, little guilt in financial reliance on other people, as well as extravagance, especially that Vic's wallet was not exactly that replete yet. So yeah, not the greatest first impression that Lance made and not a very good argument proving that he had indeed changed. In the next mission, called the Audition, Lance has tried to avoid perdition, thus gained a contact with lots of ambition. Lance got in contact with a man named Brian Forbes, who offered Lance a business partnership. He presumably met him in a bar or a strip club or a nightclub or wherever it was he was hanging out. Still, this was a freshly met contact, though Lance was acting as if he and him were best friends for years.
I am Lance Vance, baby. You can trust me. Lance T. Vance, a T for truck. Great. Yeah, love. I love you, man. No, not in a funny way. Aight, ciao.
It's seriously extraordinary how friendly Lance was with a gangster that he had just only met and who out of nowhere offered him a business deal. Such an approach was always going to be risky in the world of crime, where it's easy to get set up. Lance though was overly optimistic, very trustful, and basically acted as though he didn't account for failure, as if he didn't consider such a possibility at all. Such traits hint at one's vulnerability to manipulation, as well as they show one's lack of fear of failure, which therefore result in the lack of motivation to be precise and think one's moves through so as to minimize the risk. And that could lead to unfruitful decisions. So no wonder that Vic took this whole new contact with a grain of salt and wasn't very keen on the idea in general. As to whether trusting Forbes was good or not, well, it was not wrong or reckless. Lance wanted to make some money, which was a good initiative, but the carelessness and trustfulness he approached it was concerning. Especially that Forbes was feeding Lance with the money for nothing bullshit, so that should have triggered the alarms even more. Since, you know, most people won't give you money for nothing. I mean, sure, some do to certain people, but not so much in the drug dealing world, I imagine. Therefore, if someone comes out to you and says that they finna pay you big time for low effort jobs, your first assumptions should be that they think you are stupid and wanna manipulate you. Lance, on the other hand, got excited and didn't see any potential deception in this, and that was concerning. Although, having the complete lack of fear of failure also has its positive sides, and we need to praise Lance for his willingness to act. Of course, we know that in life, if we take a fully rational, realistic, cautious and no risk allowed approach, we would probably never take any actions, as we would always find even small factors beyond our control that could potentially lead to a failure. So we'd resign from taking a risk completely. Failure is punishing. Of course, we failed to achieve our goal and potentially face some consequences. But the human body also developed emotional systems that are meant to motivate us to avoid failure, aka regret. Lance's regret system was clearly very weak. Therefore, fear of failure did not stand in the way, so he was very willing to act and to take risks, simply because he didn't mind failing, or he didn't even bother to think things through, so he wouldn't have even seen what's the risk. Of course, as with everything, balance is the rightest approach. If we are too cautious, we won't fail, but we'll also not succeed, as we will never try to due to the fear of failure. If we are too willing to act, we will try to succeed too much, and even in situations where the risk is too high, so sooner or later, we're bound to fail. Lance seemed exactly like the second case, so as much as the positive was that he was very ready to act and motivated, the downside was that he had a bigger chance of making rash decisions. So Vic's negative feedback so far, I'd say that is fully justified, as Lance's behavior was overly optimistic and careless. The job in the end, which was to collect a car with the drugs stashed in it for Forbes from some depot near the docks, was carried out successfully. There was one issue, as when Lance was collecting the job description at the burger shop, the restaurant got raided by some thugs, whom then Vic and Lance had to get rid of, and the feds ended up thinking it was them who had attempted to rob the restaurant, so they had to shake him off. But that was just simply bad luck, it wasn't Lance's fault by no means. Next up, we got the mission for Forbes, money for nothing. From what I can figure out of this is that Forbes knew that the police were keeping watch over a certain lockup in town and expecting someone to soon come collect merchandise from there. Forbes though knew that the drugs had already been moved, so he planned to capitalize on the fact that the feds think the place is hot. He wanted to go and steal some merchandise off some smuggler, but in order to keep the feds off his and Lance's back, because he wanted to do it with Lance, Vic was supposed to go to the lockup and pretend as if he is conducting the drug transport expected by the feds. That way, he would keep the police attention whilst Forbes and Lance can do their thing and face less heat. Now Lance of course is still acting overly optimistic and 100% certain that everything is cool and absolutely no fraud could ever occur. Although when it comes to raw facts, so far he's been effective, and yeah, as much as he didn't seem to account for failure, well, he didn't fail yet. Vic's frustration here with Lance was mainly caused not by him doing ish, but because Victor weren't really a big fan of drug trafficking, and then that was exactly what Lance was getting him involved in. So Vic was more angry at that than at the manner Lance was handling things. And that on its own is a flaw though. I mean, it's more of a personality trait than stupidity. See, Lance didn't seem to care at this point that his brother didn't want to sell drugs and become the biggest rude boy in town. So he didn't really take into consideration what his brother wanted, but nonetheless very much wanted the relationship with him. He wanted to be friends, but he wouldn't adjust to the other person and rather preferred to hide those uncomfortable facts that could discourage the other person. I don't like it of course, as it shows a tendency for building unauthentic relationships, an approach where a person wants a relationship only to suit them and suit the other person only to a minimum point where they still do not give up on it, or at least to look like it. In other words, Lance would get them deeper into crime despite knowing that Vic didn't want to, and would lie to him when it was possible to hide something he wouldn't like. That is not something I would call a healthy relationship, therefore for me it's a negative. But like I said, this is more of a moral issue rather than a case of stupidity. Back to the story, eventually everything went well. Forbes got his stuff and the brothers got paid. Now after the mission, Lance paged Vic saying that he didn't trust Forbes no more and that he wanted to meet with him. And this is really great because it highly debunks what I was talking about before about Lance being careless and overly optimistic. It seemingly turns out that he was able to maintain balance, even though his behavior didn't give that impression. Even though Lance was acting like he'd have trusted Forbes with his life, it seemed that he did keep his head and was accounting for failure. Therefore, this was a fantastic balance. He was willing to act, was able to enjoy it and get excited about it, but when he actually spotted serious hints of falsehood, he recognized them and was ready to act on them too. And speaking of acting on him, he did act on him and met up with Forbesy at the stadium and confronted him with his suspicions that he was a copper. He also ain't mess about and he knew that Forbes wouldn't fold just from words. So he put a gun to his face from the start and Forbes admitted he was a policeman. Lance's plan was not to kill Forbes however, but to get man snatched and try to get as much info out of him as possible. Lance very smartly concluded that a Fed would have a lot of info they could utilize. This was well played by Lance. I mean, it would have been perfect if not for one thing. This more of an inexperienced thing, but Lance approached Forbes with a gun very recklessly. He should have kept some distance just outside of his reach, but to still have a clear shot at him. As it was, it seemed like the gun made Lance feel invincible and therefore Forbes managed to hit him and began escaping. Forbes got into Lance's car, whose boot opened loose during the chase, and it turned out that Lance was keeping thousands of dollars in cash in there, justifying it that you never know when you're gonna need a few grand.
Oh man, that's our money! Get him!
What the hell is our money doing in there?
You never know when you're gonna need a few grand.
This was horribly irresponsible. You shouldn't carry that much money on you because in case of situations like this one, you finna lose it all. The brothers eventually snatched Forbes and remarkably, Lance knew an abandoned building where they could take him and keep him there. I don't know if Lance just simply already managed to find out that no one went into that building and that it would be safe to keep him there, or whether he simply rented the place. In either case, it's impressive how well he planned and prepared that kidnapping and how well he knew the local territory to know places like this, considering that he has only been in town for just a couple of days. And well, the plan worked and Forbes agreed to speak. It was very reasonable to trust him as he noticed himself, he was cornered really, and lying meant getting killed for him. So Forbes told Lance about some Lone Ranger drug trafficker, told him where he'll be, what he carrying, and that he don't use bodyguards. The brothers planned to mug the geezer, so they went to meet him. Lance very consciously told Vic to watch over his confrontation with the dealer, and indeed it turned out to be crucial, as the dealer knocked out and snatched Lance. It happened presumably because since Lance was trying to mug the guy, he probably at some point may have started talking bait, like asking him to show the stuff or where he keeps it, and the dealer realized his intentions so decided to snatch him to probably find out who he working for or who gave him info. In any case, thanks to Lance's plan with Vic keeping watch from a distance, he could react and follow the dealer to his boat where he took Lance and where the stash was at. Vic ultimately killed all the man in there and thieved the merch. So yeah, maybe they ran into some trouble, but Lance's plan worked out, even though Forbes' info turned out to be out of date cause they ran into bear bodyguards on at the ship. Lance didn't stop there though and kept impressing. In order to make sure that Forbes won't lie to him or that he gives them the best of information, he then went to his flat and read his file, which was a very good idea. And it brought big news too, as Lance read about a big shipment about to happen soon and questioned Forbes about it. This time, Forbes sent the brothers to a nearby gay bar where the bikers hanged out at, promising that they will find a contact there that finna tell them all they need to know about that big shipment thing. At there though, all they got was they got jumped by the angry bikers in there who didn't like them. Eventually, they realized they got set up and managed to escape the bikers. Just as they returned to the derelict building, they spotted Forbes escaping on a scooter, went after him, and eventually Vic killed him. Lance was not the most pleased with that outcome, as he figured that they ain't have to kill him as he still could be useful. This made sense since the reason why Forbes escaped is that he somehow managed to untie himself, so a mistake that could have been simply fixed, as they got lucky enough to catch Forbes red-handed. I don't know what it was exactly that the brothers done wrong. Did they not tie him proper enough, or maybe they didn't search him and he had a knife on him or something? But yeah, either way, that's on both of them. Therefore, I assume that the reason for which Forbes had the courage to lie about the gay bar is that he probably already had a plan on how to escape when the brothers came to him to ask for info on the shipment. He just needed time to carry it out, so he needed to get the brothers busy for some time, so he made up the contacted the bar story up to give himself enough time to untie himself. And in the post-mission pager message, Enid messaged Vic that Lance been telling her that he be running things at Vice. And well, I always laughed at it, but now I analyze it, actually, so far, sure, Lance weren't perfect, but he was willing to act, determined, cautious enough, making good plans and managing the business. So yeah, maybe he was not Ricardo Diaz kind running things, but he did have the right to say something like that because his efforts so far has been tremendous. Now in the next mission, Snitch Hitch, we got an argument between the brothers.
Hey, I'll call you back. What's your problem, man? Huh?
My problem? My problem is you're gonna have us both killed because you're a moron. I told you not to get us in so deep.
Shut up and grow some balls.
What, tough guy? What did you say to me? When will you grow a fucking brain?
Vic complains at Lance because he didn't want to get so deep into the criminal underworld. However, in the context of today's subject and the main question, it's very important. Because Vic complained at Lance and called him a moron not because he was dumb and doing stupid things, but because Lance wanted to be a gangster and brought Vic along with him, and Vic didn't want to be one. Lance wasn't the problem here. The problem was the personality mismatch we talked about. Of course, Vic could protect himself with morality and strive for safety, as being a gangster is more dangerous and less moral than not being one. Plus, he was the older brother and more experienced one, and Lance was the one who wanted to reunite, not him. Lance was joining his operation, not Vic Lance's, so Vic was the one to blame and make him look like the culprit, even though it was just a mismatch of personalities, so arguments like that were basically inevitable regardless of how effective Lance would be. Lance though was still continuing to do what he wanted very well. He managed to find out where to get info about a big shipment about which he found out from Forbes' file. The brothers ran into some complications but eventually managed to gain the file. And as we're here, I'd like to note one observation which doesn't seem like a skill at first, but then it's probably the most important one out of all. See, one thing that Lance was infinitely better than Victor at was actually enjoying life. And this is greatly shown by this cutscene.
Lance!
Hey, bro, this cat really knew how to travel. There's some stylish shit in here.
Never mind that. Did you get the file?
Sure, no problem.
No problem? I could've used a little help out here, ass brain.
Take it easy, bro. It's all good.
Lance, take the file and get the hell out of my sight.
Lance, in the middle of a gunfight, takes a moment to appreciate the interior of his enemy's private jet. And overall, we see how Lance was really friendly with everyone he met, how he made fun of every situation, whether it would be a party or having to war a cartel. He was a very enjoyment-oriented person, and he managed to find enjoyment in almost everything. Vic, on the other hand, definitely had a more practicality-oriented personality, which means he was more wired for the bad times than the good times, meaning that in situations where it's ish, he could be a support more than anyone else. But when he actually managed to fix the situation, then he didn't know what to do or how to enjoy that better time. His relationship with Louise is a perfect example. When Louise was doing terrible, was violated by Marty, had to live at her sister's, was feeling hopeless, Vic was the one to always help her with her struggles, raise her spirits. He became her motivation to act. And then after Marty got killed and finances improved too, cause Vic took over Marty's operation, before long they stopped speaking, which Louise took very personally, even though Vic didn't have no bad intentions. He just simply didn't know how to enjoy life. He knew better than anyone how to fix problems, but didn't know how to then indulge existence after those problems have been fixed. And Lance, no matter if there was problems or not, was always in a good mood, always made jokes, had fun with people, and simply enjoyed his life. That was most likely also one of the reasons Vic so often was complaining at Lance. He was simply sort of jealous of that. He couldn't stand the fact that Lance can enjoy everything and see the world through pink tint, whilst Vic can clearly see that life is terrible, their situation is terrible, they have to deal with 5 wars, could die at any moment, and are in colossal debt. Therefore, he was blaming Lance to kind of prove to himself that Lance is wrong in his enjoyment, and Vic was kind of subconsciously trying to bring him down to justify his own pessimism. A very similar dynamic existed between Roman and Nico in GTA 4, although Nico was obviously much less keen to pick on his cousin, but there's a few conversations that show as well how Nico was frustrated with Roman's optimism and the fact that he himself isn't like that too.
Not so bad. I mean, I don't think we'll be impressing women with our wonderful hot tub, but this looks okay.
Yes, great.
Come on, what's wrong?
What's wrong? What's wrong? Where should I start? All right, I'll start with you. What's wrong with you? 15 minutes ago, you were cowering in fear because you didn't know what was going to happen. Now, you know everything is shit, and we're going to be killed, and you're all cheerful. I don't get it.
I guess I'm an optimist.
An idiot, not an optimist.
I was bored of Broker anyway! I'm glad you turned up and made some Russian killers burn down my home and business. Oh, yeah, thanks, Nico. Thanks a bunch. Is that better?
Much!
Meanwhile, we move to the last mission of the first and penultimate story section, from zero to hero. Lance already got what he wanted. The file they acquired indeed contained information on the big shipment. Lance found out where it was being loaded and to whom it belonged. And this first cutscene again debunks what we complained about in Lance before.
Vic, don't go soft on me now. I got what we finally needed. I know how we can get our hands on one big shipment completely free. We can finally get Pete the healthcare he needs.
Look, Lance, I am a long way from being a good guy, but drugs just mean trouble.
I agree, man. 100% agree. That's why we're gonna get this one big payday for all the hard work and split!
It seems that he actually did account for Vic's personality after all. He claimed that his plan was to get this last shipment to earn a big load of money to set them and their family up for a long time, get Pete the treatment he needed, and then dissolve the partnership. That's because he knew that Vic didn't want to be a drug dealer like him, and it seemed that he was not a huge fan actually as well, although he may have exaggerated that. Still, that puts him in a very good light. He cared about his family, even though it was spoiled. He accounted for Vic not wanting to be a gangster and found a way for everyone to be happy. And let's remember that he done all that while getting absolutely zero credit from Vic and only being patronized and complained at. That isn't stupidity, that's determination at its finest. He of course even prepared the necessary backup for the thievery, which eventually went successful and already had a place where to stash the merch. Perhaps we should skip the fact that the brothers stashed it at Lance's yard and did it in front of the police. I think Rockstar is to blame for that, not Lance. So I didn't mention that before, but I bet as most of you surely remember, Martinez was the person from whom the brothers stole the coke off. However, now it turned out that Lance's research was lacking.
Thanks for the coke, Martinez. Now you know how it feels to get fucked.
Oh, you fucked us both, Vic. That coke you ripped off belonged to the Mendez brothers. I was just the shepherd. Now, we're all on their shit list, and the only way off is in a fucking bag.
Martinez was not the owner of the shipment, he was only delivering it for the real owner, which was the Mendez cartel, a far stronger and dangerous organization than Jerry Martinez. This was not really a mistake though, as Lance seemed to have expected such a possibility. He was not worried by that info at all.
We don't have to worry about a thing. Once we sell the coke, we can pay off the feds and handle anything the Mendez brothers throw at us.
He knew that after they sell the coke, they'll have the resources to fight off any unexpected opposition and pay off the feds. So he did seem to have everything covered still. Additionally, Lance very quickly found a buyer for the cocaine and managed to negotiate an attractive deal. So again, great work. But of course, as we know, the deal never happened because Janet, Lance's mum, stole the coke for herself. But this still wasn't Lance's fault. It was on both of them again. Neither of them should have trusted their mum and allowed her back. Meanwhile, Vic treated her as harmless, which was a mistake. They shouldn't have let her know where the drugs was. Vic of course blamed Lance for everything. On one hand, unfairly and exaggeratedly, but on the other hand, Lance was the initiator of the idea after all, so he kinda had to take the responsibility for that cough up. However, Lance didn't panic. He immediately started to think of a way out of this situation. This was a lot more than Vic done, who just shouted at him and then set off, being no help at all. And let's remember that Lance was not only making all those moves and making up plans and ting, but also all the while he was the one taking care of all the administration of the brothers' business, like money laundering, organization, recruitment, accounting, and all that jazz. And all that he did consequently, while every now and then, or rather all the time, listening to his brother complaining at him, giving him no credit for none of that, and claiming the business as his own. That's not stupidity, that's magnanimousness. And now the mission Blitzkrieg, which starts with the cutscene in which Lance consoled Vic that the Mendez brothers surely didn't want to kill them, just hurt a little.
The Mendez brothers, they don't want us dead anymore.
Nope.
No. They might want to hurt us a bit, but kill us? No.
Now of course, that was a desperate thought that was only meant to prevent Lance from breaking down by noticing ridiculous facts which were technically an improvement over what the brothers feared before, but still far from anything acceptable. Still, if that was what allowed Lance to cope and try to fix the situation, then let it be. At least he was actually trying to solve the issue, whilst Vic just came and only complained again. Although, those desperate conclusions were unfortunately not the only ways of coping for Lance. The other was cocaine, which we can tell he started using since he began sniffing unnaturally often. That exposes the vulnerability of an enjoyment-oriented person like Lance. With such a personality, the chances are that a person won't be able to cope with the harsh reality if things are really bad and they need artificial helpers. A person like Vic though, who can find negatives even in good times and is not able to enjoy them, will find difficult situations like this just another day at the office. That is exactly one of the reasons people like Vic don't enjoy the good times. It's because if ish hits the fan again, it won't hurt as bad and they won't lose their head. That's why Vic didn't even think of taking drugs, while Lance had to just to cope. Of course, in my opinion, taking drugs is not good. I think you should be able to cope with problems on your own because you won't necessarily always have access to external helpers. They're expensive and addictive, while having the right mindset is free and you are fully in control. So I take this as a sign of weakness of Lance, but of course, next to all the good things he has done so far, it is quite a long way from enough to make his overall image look bad. And of course, Lance yet again had to endure the unfair criticism of his brother. This is the first time where he revealed his restrained frustration with all the critique.
Stop yelling at me! It's not my fault!
Yes, it is! If you hadn't stolen the Mendez's coke, they wouldn't be attacking all of my businesses!
I'm sick and tired of you blaming me for everything! Now I'm gonna save your empire! You do what you want!
It is honestly impressive how he was putting up with all this, but it really speaks very well of him. Because to do good things is one thing, but to do good things and never get credited for it and actually criticized for it, and then still continuing, that's proper resilience. And after Lance found out that the Mendez cartel was attacking their business, he immediately took off to save it and didn't even expect Victor's help. And at the end of this wave of attacks, Lance came out as the wiser one too.
We did it! We won!
Yeah? Well, I wouldn't go that far, bro.
What do you mean?
We might have won the day here, but we probably got our asses whipped elsewhere. I'm sorry, man.
Vic got excited that they won and everything, while Lance knew very well that they may have won the battle in a few places, but some of the other businesses suffered and the war overall is far from being over, and all they managed to achieve was to show the Mendezes that they're not someone you can just wipe out, and that maybe it would have been better to work with them, which eventually of course happened. Exactly, the Mendezes summoned the brothers to their mansion on Brawn Island and asked them who stole the coal coffin. Again, Lance ended up being the one making the decision here on what to tell the Mendezes.
So, Victor, Lance, who has been ripping us off? All of us, because now we are partners. A team, as it were, 4 brothers.
Yeah,
It was Martinez.
Really? Okay, prove it. I mean, prove it now.
Lance presumably told the Mendezes before that they can't give him the coke back as it was stolen from him. Therefore, the Mendezes needed proof that the brothers weren't hiding the coke and lying to him, as well as some hint at where to look for him in order to eventually get him back. And the plan that Lance made up was actually quite brilliant, and there really weren't too many other options on the table, because had they told the truth, they would have been laughed off, and even if the Mendezes had believed it, they would have probably simply got rid of the brothers, as they would have considered them unprofessional and useless if they allowed their crackhead mother to steal a big ass load of coke from them. If they said they didn't know who stole it, again, they would have been completely useless for the Mendezes, so it wouldn't end well neither. And finally, they could have blamed someone else, and Lance has hit a bullseye in this regard too, because with Martinez, so what Lance came up with, it really made sense and there was means to prove it, because then it would have seemed as if Martinez never really planned to deliver the cocaine to the Mendez brothers and rather wanted to take it for his soul. However, his shady plans were spoiled when Lance and Vic stole the shipment. Then he managed to steal the merch back and still not deliver it to the Mendezes. Lance also added to that the fact that Martinez in reality, as Vic found out when he called him after they'd stolen the drugs off him, was turning state at the moment. Add to that his position in the military, and the story about Martinez the undercover cop was really holding itself together nicely. And that was probably one of the only options, cause who else would they blame? They could say the bikers or the sharks or some other gang, but how would they have proved it? Meanwhile with Martinez, it made sense. Additionally, Lance also thought of how to prove to the Mendezes that Martinez was a Fed. Of course, the outcarry of this plan gameplays wise was one big nonsense and godlike fortune. Not only Vic magically knew when and where Martinez is meeting up with the Feds, but also the photos he made were probably not acceptable for a document. However, that's more on the GTA logic than Lance again. In any case, Lance additionally seemed to also have contacts in the print works, which is also quite impressive, where they fixed up a fake ID of Martinez basing on Forbes' ID, which Lance kept, and well, let's also appreciate the sole connection and the fact that he thought of Forbes and how to use this fact in their plan. This whole plan was really brilliant, I must say. Hell, he even had a plan B.
That should convince Mendez that Jerry was a cop. What if it doesn't? Run! But don't come running after me. My ass will be up in a tree in Haiti.
In the following days, Lance yet again showed that he wasn't at all over-optimistic and that he remained cautious even if he didn't seem that. He managed to find out that the DEA had bugged their businesses and apartments, and yet again, Vic embarrassed himself, while Lance came out as the one keeping his thinking straight.
Hey, where you going, man? We're gonna have bugs in all our places. And by the time you find them all, we'll be halfway through a long jail term. What am I supposed to do? These bugs transmit long range, so knock out all the police antenna. The DEA won't even get a signal from these things.
If not for Lance, Vic would have went running around from business to business, looking under carpets and in other lamps, which would take him around 10 weeks minimum and no guarantee that he would actually find them all. Lance not only stopped him from that Sisyphean task, but he also got an idea to destroy the antenna to stop all the bugs from working. Of course, I imagine it's probably not how it would run in real life, but as for GTA, that's a good plan. Besides, it worked in the game, so definitely a good plan again, by that stupid optimist Lance Vance, huh? The next mission shows that Lance wasn't only an effective businessman, but also a caring brother.
Man, it's just Louise. I really thought we had something, but we just don't get to see each other.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you know, relationships can be tough. Believe me, I know. Uh-huh. Yep. Hey, come on, man. We got some thieves to deal with. And you could take out your sexual frustrations on them. Hey, come on. Let's pop.
Yeah.
You know I love you, bro. Aight.
He was very interested in what Vic was struggling mentally with and listened to Vic's dilemma over his relationship with Louise, which, as we said before, stopped after Marty's death because there was no problems to be solved, so Vic didn't know how to keep it going. Additionally, Lance, wanting Vic to feel better, said that he should stop thinking about it now and offered to go with him to get the coke back for the Mendezes, as it was recently stolen. He also said that he himself has had issues with relationships, most likely referring directly to his relationship with Victor and the fact that he got patronized for all he did, even though his efforts were very impressive. And another thing I appreciate is, so I think everyone managed to realize that Lance was lying about the bikers having stolen the coke. And yeah, at first you may have thought that he just lost his mind. But no, Lance specifically made up this story just so him and Vic can spend some time together and to relieve Vic, who thanks to that could at least temporarily forget about pain to do with Louise. If I was a woman, I'd say that it was sweet and adorable. But remaining myself, it really showed that Lance truly cared about Vic and sincerely wanted him to feel at peace. Of course, they didn't get the drugs back, but hey, at least Lance got himself a new bike, innit? And now in the next mission, White Lies, my image of Lance could either slightly improve or get broken into pieces. So Vic came to Lance's yard and he met him and Louise getting high. Now there's two possibilities how Lance and Louise ended up in that situation. First one, Lance, having seen how much Vic wanted the relationship with Louise, invited her to come over and well, they both ended up snorting coke somehow. In that scenario, I like the fact that Lance invited Louise so her and Vic could reunite, but I obviously don't like the fact that he gave her drugs, since he knew how much Vic disliked him. Now that makes me think of a much more evil scenario. See, Louise was sort of a rival for Lance, because Vic liked her more despite her not really doing anything, while he, Victor, was constantly criticizing Lance, even though he, Lance, was doing everything for him. Therefore, Lance found it unfair, and in this mission, he could have specifically invited Louise and given her drugs because he knew that Vic wouldn't have liked that and that maybe he'd give up on Louise if he found out that she's become a junkie. That I couldn't like in any universe. That's not only forcing a relationship but also doing so by ruining a relationship for another person and doing that by encouraging someone to be a drug addict. In short, selfish and just straight up disgusting behavior. As sad as it is for him, in my opinion, Lance should have accepted the fact that Vic liked Louise better than him, because you can't force love. You can force someone to pay you, but you can't force them to love you. And if it's illogical, well, too bad, but that's what it is, and you don't have the right to destroy someone else's beautiful experience just because you think you deserve it more. Now of course, I can't confirm it, and it's not that obvious either because the first scenario also makes a lot of sense. But also, if it is correct, as much as I still dislike it intensely, Lance definitely had a reason to start thinking this way because he did deserve it more on paper. He was caring, taking care of almost everything for Vic, trying to make the best of their lives, and all he was criticized for it. While Louise was just a random woman who didn't really do anything for Vic apart from existing, well, maybe you could count that she got Vic to start an empire, if to consider that a good thing of course. And I don't say that Louise was a bad person, she was a good person, but she wasn't contributing to Vic's life the way that Lance did, and yet he valued her a lot more than Lance. So Lance was traumatized, so that conclusion was, to be honest, almost inevitable. But well, this world isn't fair, so that doesn't really work as an excuse for me. In any case, Vic fell out with Louise, as Lance could have wanted, but he blamed Lance for that too, which was, surprise surprise, not what Lance wanted. And this is the moment where he finally lost patience and had enough of all the patronizing, unfair criticism and favoring Louise over him.
Shut up! You're always telling me what to do, but if it wasn't for me, we wouldn't have any of this!
He laid it out to Vic straight in the face, and he was right. And no, Lance isn't mad by giving the coke away. He had every right to do that months ago. The fact that he only did it now was a compliment for him and a sign of huge resilience, not madness. He wanted to teach Vic a lesson by doing that. Show him that he's not someone who's gonna do everything and only get shit for it and then keep going anyway. Oh yeah, and I don't by the way think that Lance actually took the Mendez's coke for his personal use. That must have been a different one.
You had me running around town like a psycho, and all the while you're siphoning it off for your personal use. You are unbelievable.
Yeah, and of course, I still don't like the fact that Lance was on drugs, so that's a negative. Now he's been apparently wasted for days, so yeah, not cool. And again, Lance presented his extraordinary ability to gain powerful contact as he got in touch with Ricardo Diaz, one of the biggest drug barons who was unfriendly with the Mendezes, which was especially important because the brothers were not technically on the best of terms with them neither. I mean, they owed them bare money innit. Now locating Gonzalez's stash was like some god level intuition of Lance. That was just something from a different division, like a supernatural force, incomparable. Just to remind you, Diaz asked the Vances to steal Gonzalez's coke, not giving them any details of where it is apart from that it's somewhere offshore. Then, Lance's first guess was to go to a strip club, which turned out to be deadly accurate because just as they arrived, one of Gonzalez's goons walked out of it, and coincidentally, that goon led Vic straight to the place where Gonzalez kept the cocaine that Diaz wanted him to steal. So Lance was apparently supernatural as well. Now the mission Burning Bridges, in which the Mendezes said that the Vance's debt been paid off and that they now had to give up their interest and get the f out of the city. Which I by the way think was a really magnanimous offer from the Mendezes, and it was weird for wanting to get out of the criminal underworld as soon as possible Victor to reject it. But this is that one moment where Vic actually did better than Lance, because he knew that you gotta be serious and calm with people like Armando in order to get to any agreement. Lance of course was a hothead who began his vulgar and angry rants which were totally inappropriate with people like Armando. In any case, due to both brothers' mistake, in my opinion, of disagreeing to take the offer, they got captured and meant to be executed. But it's GTA, so obviously they survived. And of course, now they were in a not the best situations as they was at war with the Mendezes again. But yeah, Vic's superiority ended very quickly because Lance again was the one willing to think of a plan to get out of this fuckery. And the alternative cutscene in Blitzkrieg Strikes Again is very accurate.
What are you doing slouching around in here? We're at war, dummy.
Yeah, and you're the soldier. So go, soldier.
And what are you gonna do?
I'm a behind-the-scenes man. Infiltration, intelligence, logistics. You know what I'm saying?
I tell you what, why don't you just stay here while I do everything?
Can I get that in writing?
Lance was the head of the operation, taking care of administration, and Vic was treating him like someone lazy, not doing anything, and useless, which was utterly unfair. In the actual mission though, Lance actually done a wicked thing and asked for help the allies that Vic and him made on their way up to now. And now, embrace yourself, take out your confetti and mark this day in the calendar, because for the first time in the world's history, Victor actually praised Lance for this and didn't call him a hopelessly useless moron.
We're about to get hit by those Mendez guys. Thought we could use some of your buddies to crash the party.
What?
Help out. What, did I do wrong again?
No, man. For once you did very right. Let's go deal with these pricks.
So the Mendezes attacked their businesses again, and the backup from Umberto and Phil turned out to be crucial as they managed to defend themselves very well. Additionally, Lance didn't stop there and wanted to now attack the Mendezes, utilizing the contact he had gained in the shape of Ricardo Diaz, which was also a great move because this situation had to be resolved as soon as possible because the brothers couldn't really afford a war with the Mendezes. And now this first cutscene of the mission Lost and Found really well captures the thesis that Luis was an obstacle in Lance's way, and a rival in his efforts to be best friends with Vic.
Hey, Vic. Is Louise still in the hospital?
Yeah, but she'll be getting out soon.
That's good. Look, we got a big deal coming down today. I'm gonna need you there.
Wait a minute. Why are you asking about Luis?
Take it easy. It's just that, Martinez called and he said that he's gonna pay her a visit. And I don't think he means to take some fruit.
What?
Look, the hospital's got security. She'll be fine. Let's you and me just go make some money.
You're kidding, right?
Oh, man. Get your priorities in order.
Although we see how Lance actually was worried about Luis in this mission, which makes me think that perhaps that theory about him trying to ruin Luis in Vic's eyes is less likely than it was. Separately though, Lance organized a deal, which sure turned out to be an ambush, but let's appreciate the initiative and the willingness again. And soon the collaboration with Diaz that Lance planned kicked off. Diaz asked Lance and Vic to destroy Armando's bearer bonds and lend her money so Lance could buy high-tech gear, them allowing Vic to do that. Even though Lance got drunk and Vic complained again, the loan that Lance got from Diaz was not actually a bad deal probably. They were in a bad situation due to the war with the Mendezes. They needed funds to be able to afford it, so they did be quite desperate. Of course, again, what I don't like is that Lance got drunk. And not only that, he got drunk at a business meeting. Again, not cool. Like my Pyre, and again, Lance's reputation is hanging by a thread. See, the Mendezes got Luis, and they're now blackmailing the brothers that should they not leave the city right away, they finna kill her. And we see that Lance at the entrance called Luis a drug addict, a bitch, and suspected that she stole coke off him. Additionally, after Luis's sister came with the news that Luis got snatched, Lance said they should let her die. Now, I think that this is less likely, but I am concerned that Lance may have actually secretly gave Luis up to the Mendezes to ultimately get rid of her, so then Vic maybe appreciates him. And well, this would be way too much. It would be selfish and just bloody evil. So I just hope that it weren't the case, you know. And again, the last cutscene of the mission after Luis died shows perfectly how much of an obstacle Luis was for Lance, and that he couldn't stand that Vic preferred her over him.
Hey, Vic, I know you cared about her, man. But she wasn't right for you. Vic. Hey, Vic. Family's what matters. Oh, damn.
And of course, just to be clear, I mean, I thought it was obvious from the start, but when I say Vic preferred Luis over Lance, I don't mean that Lance wanted to marry Victor or some ish, just that he wanted to be closer with him and wanted to be appreciated, while Luis was someone who was taking too much of Vic's attention, was discouraging Vic from chasing his criminal career, and also she didn't deserve it, rationally speaking. But then again, love isn't rational. Either way, Luis was now gone, and that indeed probably helped Lance later convince Vic to stay in the drug business. I mean, until 1986. He of course kept making moves and got that 20 kilograms of cocaine, which he first agreed to get rid of, but as we see in Vice City, Lance eventually managed to convince Victor to continue their coke business. And so we got to the end of GTA Vice City's stories. The brothers got rid of their demons, paid off their debts, and now they are truly free. Vic wanted to leave town and lay low for a while. Lance, on the other hand, wanted to keep pushing. As I already said twice, Lance eventually convinced Vic to keep selling drugs, although it seemed that the brothers at some point allowed the gang and turned freelance, though Lance never got locked up. I say that because in the VCBI in Vice City, it says that Vance crime family has got two members, Vic and Lance. Still, it seemed like they were still selling drugs throughout that time, and judging by Ken Rosenberg's words, they were not in the mood to stop by the time of Vice City.
Now, I've talked to the suppliers and they are very keen to start a business relationship. So if all goes well, we should be doing very nicely for ourselves, which is, you know, good.
The crucial factor in Lance convincing Vic to stay in the business was probably that Luis was dead, so he had little to live for, so became quite indifferent. And so, in 1986, the brothers have started a business relationship with the Forelli Mafia from Liberty City. The deal that was meant to kick off the operation was held at Vice City docks. The deal, however, was ambushed by unknown assassins who killed Vic at the process and stole the money and the merchandise. Lance, who was also there, managed to escape. Now, there was a mistake I think that not only Lance but both of the brothers made. And it's about something that I talked about in another video already. So a complete lack of any backup. They were exchanging a lot of money for a lot of snow. It was the most obviousness that either them and the Forelli Mafia should have brought along some insurance. At least equip themselves with some guns, or put people to watch them from the rooftops, just like Lance told Vic in Leap and Bound, which later proved crucial in that mission, none of which they did. So that is definitely a proper blunder from them. Of course, I did once come up with a theory that Lance could have wanted to kill his brother at that deal because he was tired of all the patronization, which now doesn't sound that wild considering what we've already analysed and exposed how unfair in reality all that criticism was. Among arguments for that theory is that Diaz in VCS said to Lance that he had once killed his brother because he was also tired of the patronization. And the argument is basically that the developers didn't put that dialogue in the game just for a good show, but to suggest that Lance was inspired by Diaz and decided to do the same with Victor later, in order to impress Ricardo, so he can work with him. And of course, if we assume that, then the lack of backup is understandable since Lance knew exactly what was going on, and that's also why he would stay in the heli rather than go cover his sibling. That one also offers a different explanation as to how Diaz found out about the deal. This time, it not only would have been Gonzi, but also Lance. Although this theory is also far from confirmed, and I do not think that Lance could ever actually have killed his brother. Despite all the patronization, it seemed to me that he still always loved him and Vic was extremely important to him. Additionally, the deal with the Forellis was literally against Diaz, so if Lance suddenly came to Diaz and told him that him and Vic arranged that deal, but now actually he changed his mind and wants Vic dead, Diaz would have not only recognized that he would have got fucked off, Diaz would have not only recognized that he would have got betrayed because the deal was creating competition for him, so he wouldn't have wanted to work with Lance, but also would have seen that Lance was ready to betray his brother, which maybe is impressive for a power-crazed egoist like Diaz, but not for someone who wants an equal partnership like Lance. Additionally, why would Lance later start an investigation to find out who done thieved the food if he knew who it was from the start? Well, unless he only pretended to not know just to get close to Tommy and then together abolish Diaz, because he saw in Tommy a replacement for Vic. But that is a very far-reaching theory and I find it unlikely. Anyway, like we said, the deal failed and Lance lost not only his brother, but a customer and cocaine. Was it his fault? Well, it wasn't. As we know, the all but confirmed scenario here is that Gonzalez told to Diaz about the deal, so it was a mistake on Cortez's side, so Lance just got unlucky with that. Of course, no backup is still a joke, but we can't blame him for the leak. And now the next appearance of Lance comes in the mission Back Alley Brawl, where Tommy Vercetti, so the survivor of the Forelli delegation present at the ambush deal, was looking for clues as to where to look for the lost money, and doing so by confronting Leo Teal. He was almost certainly one of the assassins at the transaction. However, Tommy got so into it that he accidentally killed Teal, and not long after that, Lance appeared at the scene, offering Tommy that they can work together to find the missing goods. And that was a very good move. Finding a partner with the same purpose was always going to speed up the process. So Lance had a very good initiative in trying to reach out to Tommy. Tommy, of course, as more of a Lone Ranger type of guy, wasn't so keen at first, and eventually he half agreed, as in he tolerated Lance's help but didn't really care that much if it persisted or not. Also, a very important aspect of this is that Lance perhaps not only just wanted to quickly locate the missing merch, but also could have wanted to look for a replacement of his brother. We know how much his brother meant to him, and especially one of the most important values in his life was to have a partner, not a romantic one, but just someone with whom he could live his life, share his success, and then enjoy it with them. So far, though it was tough love, Vic was that person. But now, Vic was dead and Lance needed to replace him. And it's very possible, and actually it becomes certain as the video goes, that Lance saw that replacement in Tommy. So that was another one of his motivations. I also have to appreciate how quickly Lance, who as we remember had to resort to drugs before while dealing with difficult situations, now managed to deal with the death of the most important person in his life just within days without drugs it seems, and immediately move on to taking actions to find the missing goods and also to find a replacement for his dead brother. That's a huge progress over Vice City stories and a really great ability to cope with a loss. The mission Guardian Angels is simply a continuation of Lance's efforts to get closer to Tommy. The first conclusions regarding the culprit of the dog's thievery came in Phnom Penh 86.
What are you doing here? Hey, I've been asking around. It's obvious that Diaz jumped the deal and iced my brother. And he'll kill you too. I can take Diaz. No, listen to me. I'll handle Diaz. He's beginning to trust me.
Lance has been uninterruptedly working on determining who sent the assassins to the docks in the day of the deal, and he was now certain that it was Diaz, which when we analysed the whole thread was definitely correct. By the way, I see bare people in the comments still believing that it was Sonny who ambushed the deal in Viceport because of the money and the drugs that appear on his table in the mission An Old Friend. And seriously, as much as this argument is a lot, that theory doesn't make a lot of sense. And therefore, for everyone still believing that theory, I highly recommend checking out the video on my friend's channel they covering this topic. I think it very thoroughly and completely debunks that theory, as well as offers the rational explanation for the drugs on Sonny's table. I'll definitely leave that video for you in the outro and in the description if I don't forget. Anyway though, Lance's research was correct, basically. And another thing worth mentioning is that Lance really rushed Tommy towards killing Diaz. Now of course, he killed his brother, so he was eager to get revenge on him. But there is another, and actually the main reason, quite a mind-blowing one too I think, for why Lance wanted to get rid of Diaz as soon as possible. Remember the dynamic in GTA VCS, where Lance wanted to be Vic's #1 person, was trying very hard to do that, yet wasn't ever fully appreciated? And there was also Louise, who despite taking up drugs and overall not really doing much for Vic apart from being given his help and suggesting he take over Marty's show, Vic valued her infinitely more than Lance. That was very harsh on Lance, and it wasn't without mental consequences. Lance started off GTA VCS with a very healthy mindset. He very much wanted the relationship with his brother, and he also didn't take it for granted, but did his utmost to earn it. As we analyzed, he was caring, was putting in enormous amounts of work, research, everything so they are financially set up, and he tried his best to set up circumstances in which him and Vic can enjoy a happy life. However, Vic, with all his unfair criticism and favoring Louise, showed Lance that his healthy approach was ineffective. Lance's experience with Vic taught him that one cannot earn a relationship, and that earning it is no guarantee of maintaining a relationship. It taught him that love isn't earned, but is rather just a random thing. But he wanted to be loved, but wasn't. Therefore, he came to a conclusion that in order to be loved, you don't need to earn it, but rather be the only alternative. Now that wasn't a moral approach. However, I don't blame him for coming to that conclusion. The truth is, GTA Vice City Stories portrays the process of Lance's traumatization, which later had its huge consequences in GTA Vice City, which we'll get to. Vic's unfair criticism left a burning scar on Lance's mindset, and he was forced by this experience to adapt an immoral mentality just to be able to even hope that he can ever be happy again. Of course, we said that Lance was actually incompetent and difficult in his youth, which left him a bad reputation, especially in the eyes of his older sibling. Therefore, that could be a reason why Vic never wanted to appreciate Lance, since he was in turn taught by the relationship with him up to this point that nothing good or useful can be expected of him. Therefore, when Lance did something good, the past experiences taught Vic to always take everything he does with a grain of salt. This is of course not an excuse, as much as Lance's later unhealthy competitive mentality is unexcusable as well. However, in both cases, we can kind of understand the reasons for why those mistakes have been made, either by Lance and Victor. And so, in GTA Vice City, Tommy became the Vic, and Diaz became the Louise. Lance, having learned his lesson, knew that what he has to do is not earn Tommy's, well, maybe not love this time, but respect and acceptance, but rather that he'll be saved by just getting rid of the competition, so Diaz. See, Lance, having become paranoid after Vic's treatment, undoubtedly feared that Tommy may decide to work with Diaz instead of starting his own operation with Lance at his side. Therefore, to prevent this from happening, he wanted to get Diaz out of the picture as soon as can be, just so Tommy never gets the idea. So it may seem that Lance was just eager to get revenge on his brother, and that too of course, but in my eyes, it was much more caused by his trauma and paranoia. That's why in Phnom Penh 86 and in the mission Supply and Demand, as well as in a phone call thereafter, he kept telling Tommy they should get on with killing Diaz, eventually deciding to try to do it himself in the mission Death Row. And yeah, rationally speaking, that was a mistake that he tried to do it, but from an emotional standpoint, it was just simply his reaction to the world's utterly unfair treatment of him, which doesn't make him dumb, but simply tragic. However, the hope was there because Tommy, despite that Lance messed up, he came for him and saved him, which shows that Tommy really cared about Lance. Even though Lance was kind of an uninvited guest at the start, and even though Tommy was more of a loner, he did appreciate Lance's efforts and simply cared for him. So Lance had hope, but as we'll find out later in the video, his past demons have eventually blurred that hope. For now though, things were going well because Lance achieved his goal and got rewarded. Him and Tommy killed Diaz and successfully took over his operation, and now him and Tommy were partners. Although, as we find out later, Lance did get a smaller share of the business. However, he wanted to immediately make this whole effort count and therefore suggested that Tommy establish a protection racket that would have earned him money from extortions. The first issues arose in the mission bar Brawl, where Tommy complained at Lance for not putting in enough effort in his work.
What's the problem? Some bars refusing to pay. They reckon they're protected by a local gang of thugs. But don't worry, Tommy, I can handle it.
You call this handling it?
Basically, one of the shop owners refused to pay protection, but Lance didn't take care of this instantly, and that angered Tommy, who expected better. Now what we need to understand here is that Lance wasn't a lazy person, which he proved in GTA Vice City stories. The relationship with Vic, as we said, taught him that effort doesn't guarantee validation, and to put in other words, he doubted something I would call conditional validation. Conditional as in earned, meaning that you don't take love or validation for granted, but you know that you have to also put in your bit of effort in order to maintain a relationship, which is a very healthy and moral approach. But well, exactly, Lance was shown by Vic that that healthy approach doesn't really work for him. And so, if the conditional validation concept failed him, he started to believe in unconditional validation. Not only did he believe it, but he also had live-in proof. Well, now not living, used to be living proof, in Louise, who didn't earn her validation, yet was still highly valued by Victor. And so what's important here is that Lance's trauma extended even further than what we was talking about so far, because Lance's efforts were not only ignored by Vic, but they were also punished by Vic with that constant criticism. Meaning that Lance did not only shift his mindset, but his brain recognized a pattern that conditional validation is not only ineffective, but it's also punishing. So as mad as it sounds, putting in a lot of work for Lance became like danger due to his past experiences. The main issue with that, of course, was that Victor's treatment was unfair and definitely not universal. Let me put it like this. The Lance from 1984 put into this situation where he partners with Tommy would have put in enormous amounts of work and would have impressed Tommy highly and would have never felt insecure with Diaz or no one else. That's the contrast, because Lance assumed that Tommy would have been just like Vic, unappreciating, nepotistic, and ever criticizing. The thing was that Tommy was not Vic. In Tommy's case, Lance's mindset from 1984, which he abandoned due to the trauma, would have worked perfectly, because Tommy did actually not only appreciate effort, but he required it, meaning that Lance, for whom now putting in effort was basically like lethal danger because of the fear of getting criticized for it and unappreciated for it was too strong, preferred to step off the gas and rely on unconditional validation. Therefore, yes, he did expect at this point to be valued for nothing, just like Louise. But it wasn't his arrogance or stupidity or delusion or naivete, but simply trauma and understandable confusion. And that confusion and exaggerated insecurity is perfectly captured by the post-mission phone call.
Tommy, we gotta talk about stuff.
What's the problem, Lance?
It's you, my friend. I feel you're not giving me a fair slice. And more than that, you've been embarrassing me in front of the boys. I can't have that.
Lance, it ain't like that. You've been making mistakes.
Tommy, I'm not your message boy. I'm not your running boy.
Lance, don't screw up and we won't have any problems. I screw up, you can lay into me anytime.
Tommy, I've done everything for you. You treat me like a fool. Don't do that.
Lance, I won't rip you off or stab you in the back, okay? Just take it easy. This is tough enough without you getting all emotional on me. Trust me. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
I hear you, Tommy, but I can't take this much more.
Now, I don't expect all of you to understand this, and I get it if some of you won't get how one can be scared of putting in effort, because that's one of those things that you mostly have to experience or be gifted with incredible empathy in order to understand. But well, I do. And as I said, I don't treat this whole explanation as an excuse or a justification of Lance's behavior, because it was wrong. It's just that all I'm trying to say is that it was not a result of him being dumb or ridiculous, but it was a result of the unfairness he faced throughout his life. And Lance also couldn't keep his confusion inside just as well as he was able to hold his frustrations at Vic's criticism in Vice City's stories. In the Copland mission, we see how he offloads that frustration unfairly on Mike. He messed up a job that probably weren't even his fault, but more the fault of 40 Gig. And as we was talking about the confusion of Lance, where on one hand, he's seeing consciously that Tommy cares for him, but his brain was saying something else, having been traumatized and shown something else by the relationship with Vic, therefore his body discouraged Lance from putting in effort, then this next heart-wrenching phone call after this mission just simply says it all.
Tommy, it's me, Lance. Keep your mouth shut there, Tommy, because I ain't got no time to talk. I ain't interested in what you gotta say. Why should I be? You don't care about me, do you? You gotta look after me a bit better. Give me a spare slice, you know? Hey, Tommy, man, look, I'm sorry. It's just that people patronize me all my life, treat me like a little kid. My brother would do that. Please, man, don't do that. I gotta go.
Now this phone call shows that Lance hasn't fully shifted his mindset. It was more of his subconscious side learning the patterns that Lance didn't necessarily agree with. However, he couldn't fully control it, and it resulted in him knowing consciously that he should have trusted Tommy and put in effort and worked and be his old self, but his subconscious side, traumatized by the relationship with Vic, began to emotionally punish the behaviors that Lance thought were right, which really shows in how tragic situation that character found himself in GTA Vice City. He knew he should have trusted, but he feared it. He knew he should have put in work, but he feared to be punished for it, even though Tommy would have appreciated it as opposed to Victor. Lance wanted good, but his trauma eventually didn't allow him to recover from his relationship with his older brother. Therefore, at the end, getting completely lost mentally and having been failed by either conditional and unconditional validation, he lost belief in his values, including loyalty it seems, and decided to betray Tommy by collaborating against him with Sonny. But that wasn't the true Lance Vance. That was the ruined, emotionally confused, and exhausted Lance Vance, who doubted everything he believed in. After everything we talked about, I don't think that his betrayal needs any more explanation than that. The partnership with Tommy was too heavy emotionally for him, and so he couldn't keep it going. And why would he respect loyalty if the world never respected his efforts? But Lance didn't give up, he just changed completely. He abandoned loyalty, morality, and probably after all the disappointments to do with other people, he could have now resorted to selfishness. Now, I won't know the answer to this question, but maybe there's something you could try to theorize about in the comments. But I'm interested in what Lance's plan to do with Sonny was. Since the dream of having an equal partner failed him twice already, I don't think he'd want to try that again. First of all, because I see how well his brain learned from the relationship with Victor, but also if he allowed loyalty, then I don't think that friendship remained as his top priority. So was he planning to betray Sonny too? I don't know, it's hard to tell. Let me know what you think about it. In any case, he obviously got killed, which I don't want to say that is the best thing that could have happened to him, but at this point, I think he could have done with some rest from all the contradicting emotion that he was facing. Okay, so now let's summarize everything, and I'm gonna give you my final conclusion. Lance was, in my opinion, an extremely tragic character, whose childhood gave him a label of the stupid one, which stayed with him even after he had changed. Victor's lack of hope towards him, his spoiled judgment due to divided purposes of him and Lance, and the presence of Luis made all of Lance's efforts like void to Victor. That lack of appreciation traumatized Lance, who concluded that effort doesn't matter and is better to simply be the only one. He applied that strategy to Tommy after Vic died. However, that was a mistake. Tommy was different from Vic. He would have appreciated very much what Vic had ignored. But Lance's brain refused to recognize that, even though we get the signs of his conscious self knowing he should have trusted Tommy. So it's a mistake that is difficult to blame him for, since his emotion and body learned by that point that effort was like poison, since all the effort he had put in had been criticized by Victor in the past. Even if Lance knew that he should have tried harder, his body's feedback was opposite because of the past experiences. that put Lance into a tragic inner conflict and led to him unfairly betraying Tommy out of exaggerated insecurity, which led to his demise. So to directly answer the question from the title of the video, Lance was by no means dumb, at least not after he changed. He probably was reckless and silly as a child, but after he changed, and regarding the things he done in the story, there are seriously very few things to criticize and a whole lot to admire and credit him for. In VCS, he was constantly making moves, friends, taking the initiative and solving problems, and all that whilst constantly never being credited for it and criticized for it. In VC, there was far less of it of course, but that's due to trauma, so I can't personally blame him for any of that. It's truly sad how the GTA community perceives this character. I mean, it would have been if he was a real person. And I'm no saint, because before this video idea came to me, I was the same. But this only shows how shallow we can be. Of course, that is my opinion, but most of us simply look at Tommy's and Vic's reactions towards Lance's actions and build their opinion about him on that alone, rather than to actually take a thought and try to see beyond that. Of course, Lance is just a video game character, but the lesson you should take out from this video, of course, that is if you agree with my points, because you have every right to not do that, is to look beyond the surface factors and simply not judge a book by its cover or purely by others' ratings. Let man know if you agree with me, and thank you lot for sticking till the end. Take care and respect.